Okay, I'm doing something a little bit different today. Still telling stories from my second book called The Fire Starter. Yeah, look at that. See all that? Those are all individual stories within this book, and there's actually a couple more. And so anyways, came on. Thank you for those who are watching, listening, praying for me, my family. And as you've been watching on Facebook and YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. I never really understood that from the people that were asking that, but I understand now. Not just the maybe where you maybe can get enough people to follow you for monetization. Is that a word? Yes, it is. But that's one thing. But the main thing is so people can follow your journey if you're on a journey. And I'm definitely still on this journey. So I'm sharing with you stories of my journeys with Jesus over the past 35 years. And many of those different journeys and those stories is what the people that are doing the documentary and the people that are working on the movie are interested in, and they are journeys that are not candy-coated. I'm telling you the real thing, the good, the bad, the ugly, the supernatural, the amazing, and everything. It's all in these stories, which are true stories, and it's all in the stories I'm living right now. I mean, just coming out of Texas for 90 days, New Mexico for like 8 or 9 days. I mean, honestly, there are hundreds of stories I could tell. Would everyone be interested in those stories? I'm thinking the only ones that God's asking me to share is what might be interest. But if I reach one person, it's worth it. So some of you have heard a little bit of the backstory, how I come to meet Cheryl Dindy years ago. So this is one of the stories in the book. And I realized today, and I was just talking to Cheryl, I'm upstairs in the studio, and I called her downstairs, and so I'm in her townhouse, my studio up here, in my bedroom. I said, hey, I didn't finish one of the stories. And so as I get to the end of this story, I'll tell you what story I didn't finish writing. Hey, Steve, man, I got to get a hold of Steve. Need to get music to Steve Lemons, that's for sure. So anyways, the importance of it is, I think sometimes, is that maybe you could share with people that not everything was perfect with your walk with Jesus before, and even when you've come to know him, that there are bumps, struggles, disappointments, all kinds of different things. But God is faithful through all of it. So I'm going to read to you the story. It's called Who Is That Girl? And then, like I said, at the end of this particular one, I will talk to you, and I'll share with you that I'm going to write the part that where it ends. You go, hey, well, what happened? And I'm going to tell you. Okay, I'll write that. But anyways, still got to write the Steve Lemon stories too. I got the lozenge in my mouth. Thank you for praying. Been dealing with the sinus allergy, cold, man, kicking my booty for the past week and a half. But I'm still in the game. So let me continue on, and forgive me for the lozenge in the mouth and whatever. Over the past it's actually over the past 35 years, many people have asked me, let me do the math. Sorry, 31 years when I first, when this all kind of came about, when it started. For the past 34 years, many people have asked me how I met my wife and what the story was of our meeting. I always tell them it's like an Oprah Winfrey story that you see on TV, her TV show, but with God in the middle of it, even when I didn't even know it. So here's some of that story of how I met this beautiful blonde named Cheryl. Yes, Cheryl Dindy, you still are the beautiful blonde. Yeah, we're rascals, that's for sure. Man, we've been through a lot of stuff. I hope and pray you have time to check this one out. Who Is That Girl? The movie E.T. had just come out. Some of the top songs of 1982 were Physical by Olivia Newton-John, Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. And you guys remember that stuff? And of the Blackhearts, Hurts So Good by John Cougar Mellencamp. You might have heard these songs back in the day, or maybe still catch a few of them on the oldies radio station. They're just a few of the Billboard Top 100 of 1982. I knew them well. I have been a nightclub DJ in a disco since 1977, and now as a nightclub DJ in one of the most popular clubs in Scottsdale, Arizona. There were always beautiful women around, and being a nightclub DJ, I was never alone nor wanting for attention. It's Friday night and things were getting really busy as usual, people dancing and drinking. I was set up above the dance floor in what they call a crow's nest DJ booth. You could see me, but you couldn't reach me. I had to walk through a door, climb up a ladder, and go through an opening in the floor of the DJ booth, and then close the hatch door so I didn't fall through it while playing music. Laugh out loud. Not so easy with how much I drank every night. True story. Trust me, I was never bored. I had a phone line so the patrons could call me for requests. Then I had a private line in which I could call out and people could call me if I gave them my private number. Each table was assigned a clearly marked number so you could call the other tables according to that number, right at their own table. It was a cool concept and people loved it. Yeah, let me pull this clip out of there. It's Friday and the dance floor is busy. The girl steps out into the dance floor and her friends grab a table right next to the dance floor, which is amazing because those tables are usually taken. She's wearing black spandex pants, a black shiny top, and a black and white half rabbit coat. She has blonde hair, big hair, and blue eyes. You might think, how did you know that? How'd you know it so fast? Well, that's my job. She's talking with her friends, and she takes off her coat and shoes and gives them to her friends. She turns around and looks up at the crow's nest. Our eyes meet, and out of nowhere comes this thought. Who is that girl? At this time in my life, I was not dating one specific girl, and I had many female friends that I knew from the club. Like I said, I was never alone. But who is this beautiful girl? At the time, I was 23 years old and she was 19, the legal drinking age back then. So I thought to myself, I need to get her attention more than just a phone call from the DJ booth. I still had some promo things from the club, so I got her attention and threw down a hat. Later I came down and said hello, asked her name, and met her friends. She told me a little bit about herself, and then I told her I had to go because the song was about to end. With that, I took off back up the ladder to play the next song. I called her on her booth phone, and of course, I bought them all the drinks and was trying to impress all of them. Come on. I was out to impress her any way I could. She left that night and said she'd try to come back next week if she could. She came back, and over the next few months, I had an opportunity to see her not only in the club, but to take her out on a few dates. We saw the movie E.T. She loved the movie, and so did I. She told me that I had big eyes like E.T. And I just fell in love with this beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who could really dance. It wasn't long before I surprised her with a wedding ring. I asked her to marry me, and she agreed. I like to tell you that we got married and lived happily ever after, but that wasn't the case. Over the next few months, she got nervous about her commitment, and I told her there was no pressure to get married right away. So we didn't grow closer together, but grew further apart. The nightclub lifestyle does not lend itself to fairy tale romances. So giving each other a break led us not to follow through with the commitment of marriage. She moved on to another relationship at work, and I moved on to multiple relationships in an atmosphere where that was possible all the time. I tell people there was a time when I was in good shape, had a head full of hair, and could really dance, laughing. It was a short time later that the club I was DJing at closed, not due to lack of business, but it was the owner's choice. It wasn't long before I got another DJ job in a small Scottsdale club, which at the time was the only after-hours club around. So not only was it busy Friday and Saturdays till 1 a.m., it was even busier from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. I started playing music from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. every Friday and Saturday, and 3 other nights during the week. I drank every night while I was playing. I was there for a few years and continued on with relationships that were part of this lifestyle. Every once in a while, the beautiful blonde would bring her fiancé into the nightclub to dance, and she'd ask how I was doing. I told her I was okay. I wasn't upset by them coming in. It had been a few years, and I had moved on in my life. I actually thought I'd fallen in love with 2 other times and thought marriage would be the obvious choice, but it did not work out. So now I'm just collecting engagement rings. The money, the women, the fancy sports cars, it wasn't working. I compromised so much of my life, I just accepted that this DJ lifestyle was where I was meant to be. One day, I got a call from the beautiful blonde. She asked me a question. Most everyone I tell this story to cannot believe she'd ever ask me this question, but she did. You ready? She said, Bobby, I'm getting married, and I'd love for you to DJ my wedding. This is the part where most of you might think, no way, you're kidding, right? Nope. I told her I'd love to. I'd come to the place in my life concerning this beautiful blonde that if she wasn't meant to be my wife, I was hoping she would be at least happy with someone else. And it's true. I wasn't a Christian yet. I wasn't praying for her to be happy. I was hoping her choice would make her happy. It was now at 1989, and I've been in her life since 1982. And my dreams of marrying her were over, but I agreed to DJ her wedding. I'll pause here while some of you get some tissue, a towel, or your shirt sleeve if you need to. She shared some of the things that she'd like to have happen at her wedding. Most of it was traditional wedding requests. She said, just do what you do best, Bobby, and make us dance. I said, okay. She told me where the wedding was going to take place and where the ceremony would be held and what time I was to be there. I was very familiar with this resort that overlooked the city of Phoenix. The ceremony was to be held at the very high-end restaurant that had a beautiful view overlooking the city, and the ceremony, the wedding party, would come out into the restaurant for the reception and the dancing. I was going to provide music for both the wedding ceremony and the reception. I was very grateful that a DJ friend of mine, Ralph Davis, putting your name in there because it's true, also was invited. So grateful Ralph was there. I knew I could use his help with the logistics of this wedding and anything else that I might need. I arrived very early the day of the wedding. There was going to be a lot of setup, and I didn't want to screw this one up. I had everything set up. I did sound checks, and now I just need for someone to show up and get the party started. So this is how it was going to play out, as my dogs are downstairs barking. The groom, the family, and the officiant of the wedding would be set up outside on the beautiful patio overlooking the city. The restaurant was on 3 levels. When it was time, the bride would come down a glass elevator, then walk out through the restaurant and onto the patio. So I had my music set for when she came down the elevator, and then the elevator and the door opened. Then I would play the wedding procession, and she'd walk out in the patio. So I had it in my mind. I'm rehearsing it over and over and over. I got this. I could see everyone for my cues for the ceremony. I'd be playing wedding recessional music after they finished the ceremony, and that would be when they entered the restaurant. Or that's at least how it was supposed to go. Uh-oh. You mean it didn't go like that? No. I had both the processional recessional music on a cassette tape. Remember cassette tapes? Some of you don't. Remember back then? Remember, this is 1989. And I would be playing vinyl records for this wedding. Later, my DJ friend was right next to me. We were laughing, having a good time, talking about things, and then came my first cue. I dropped the background music out and waited for the bride to come down the glass elevator. When she came down the elevator, I looked over and saw the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Wow. I then realized the wife of my dreams was going to step out of that glass elevator and marry another man today. And I froze. Everyone, including the bride, looked at me like, play the music. I panicked. My heart was racing and I was confused. I pushed the wrong button on the dual cassette player. I was now playing the recessional music that I was supposed to play after they kissed and the pastor introduced them. I didn't even realize I pushed the wrong button. The bride is looking over at me like, what are you doing? Thank God my DJ friend Ralph stopped the cassette, pushed the button for the correct music. So now the bride was on her way out to the patio. She walked out. My friend dropped the music down as they started the ceremony. My friend rewound the cassette for the time that the recessional music would have to be played. He asked me if I was all right. I told him I don't think so. I was still in shock over what I had done and the beauty of the beautiful blonde that came out of that glass elevator. When it was time for the recessional music to be played, my friend helped me to make sure I got it right. I pulled myself together and did what I do best. I entertained them. I made them laugh, and I got them all dancing. I apologized to the bride and groom. I didn't know what to say except, please forgive me. Later, I got to dance with the beautiful blonde to a slow song as my DJ friend took over. The song ended, and she walked back to her husband. A short time later, the bride's father came across the dance floor. He looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, "You should have never let her go." Then turned around and walked back to the bridal party. I think all the air left my body as I went back to playing music for the rest of the wedding. A few years later, I met the bride and groom again in a place and in a way I never would have dreamed of. At the end of the wedding, I thought to myself, who is that girl? There was more to her that I'd never got to know, and I can't explain it, but deep down inside of me, I knew there was something about her that was deeper than her beauty, even today. Trust me, after all we've been through, and still going through, still feel that. I wasn't sure I'd ever know the answer to that question. I was feeling again like the first time I saw her in the nightclub, and that was 7 years earlier. She was moving on with her life and out of mine. Continuation of that story. It had been a few years since I had been the DJ at her wedding, and so much had changed in my life. My testimony of how I came to know Jesus is in my book, my first book, called Journey for the King, Faith Walker. I surrendered my life to the Lord in January of 1990. I would find out later that the pretty blonde had her first child, a beautiful one, around the same time. There were so many things happening with the Lord. It was crazy just to keep up with all that I was learning. The journeys, the assignments the Lord would have me go on were incredible. I was 31 years old when I got saved, or when I gave my life to Jesus. I attended a mega church, and I was single, and God did not allow me to date anyone, and I mean no one. My life now was just me and Jesus, just Jesus. There were some crazy, powerful stories during that time period that I'll share later, and I will be sharing later. I even have a third book. It's called The Comeback, that I've been working on for a while too. A lot of other intertwining stories, supernatural, a lot of stuff. I know when people say supernatural, what does that mean? Well, it's natural to God, but it's supernatural to us. And when you hear the stories, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It had been some time since I had seen the pretty blonde girl that I had fallen in love with years earlier. She's now married and has a little girl. I knew where she worked, and as the Lord would lead me and let me, I would stop at her workplace every few months just to check on her and ask how things were going. She shared that her marriage was in a tough place, that her and her husband had gone for counseling. Shortly after the wedding, she found he was doing drugs and was very addicted to those drugs. She tried so many things, and nothing had brought much success. I still wanted to see her happy, and I asked if I could come to their apartment and pray over them. Whoa! Let's back that up. I still wanted to see her happy and asked if I could come to their apartment and pray over them. I know that sounds crazy, but I've been led to do so many seemingly crazy things to the Lord, only to find out He was right in the middle of the very thing He had asked me to do. She said she'd talk to her husband and let me know. She called me back a few days later and said I could come over and pray for them. I thanked her and said, just tell me where and when. We set up a day and time, and I went over one night. I didn't get to meet her daughter that night, as she was asleep. I told them both of my radical transformation and how I came to meet Jesus. The pretty blonde said she had heard some of my story from a mutual friend. I told them I knew Jesus was the answer to my healing, to mend and fix all that is broken in our lives, as my dogs are downstairs going crazy. I said, I truly want your marriage and your lives to be happy. I prayed what God has given me to pray over them. I prayed what God had given me to pray over them and thank them for the opportunity to come over. Over the next months, I would be sent on many more journeys and assignments for the Lord before I would meet the pretty blonde again. Another couple of years have gone by, and once again I had a chance to see her and her beautiful daughter, who is now about 4 years old. She was going through the final stages of her divorce. It was such a painful journey to this point in her life. She had tried everything to bring healing to her marriage, but the drug addiction had taken over in her husband's life. It was now being destructive to her and her beautiful daughter. I told you earlier, this is no fairy tale romance. It's real, it's raw, and the truth about my love, my failures, and my trust that God can heal and restore and make brand new all over again. It takes courage to put your life out there for everyone to see, some to judge, others to be touched. As I share my journeys with the Lord and what I've learned so far, I pray and hope that healing will come into your life and your family and those around you as you read some of these stories or hear them and share with others. I had an opportunity to visit the beautiful blonde and her daughter a few times. Her divorce was almost final, and I was moved by her daughter's smile and the love for people. She was only 4 years old and so smart. When I would visit, she would call me friend and smile. Her mother told me she would ask all the time, when is my friend coming over? At this time, I was producing and engineering a radio show called Radio Hope and had a recording studio in my apartment. The beautiful blonde's daughter had total recall. If you told her something, she could repeat it back to you word for word. I'd used many people to record poetry and short stories for the radio show, which was cutting edge. And I wanted to use her daughter's voice for a few poems, so I asked her if she could come to my apartment studio and I could record her daughter. They came over one night. I read the poems to my new friend, and then I asked her if she could repeat them back. She smiled and repeated the poem back to me, word for word. I looked at the beautiful blonde and said, wow. I had my friend record a few poems, and I told them I'd add instrumental music to it later, to her voice. Before they left that night, I looked into the eyes of the beautiful blonde, and her eyes just seemed to twinkle like stars. Oh, give me some tissue. Any tissue right here? Did I? It's true. She smiled. Oh, man. I had not thought about that for many years. That's the nickname I gave her 11 years ago when I first met her in the nightclub. I called her Twinkles because of her eyes. I'm sure I went back in time at that moment when I looked into her eyes. I just got lost in the memories of the past. You ever done that? Wow. How powerful is that love thing? I was trying to snap back and come into the moment. Up to this time, I've been totally single and not dating anyone for over 3 years. I contemplated the type of woman that God would bring into my life as my wife. I really thought she would be a radical, on-fire evangelist like me. But I had not met anyone who would fit the description yet. I was ministering and sharing who God was with this waitress that worked at a restaurant not too far from where I was living at the time. I would eat out a lot. I knew she was a meth addict and her boyfriend was one of the cooks at the restaurant. There was something very deep and prophetic about her life when I would share Jesus and who Jesus was in my life. She would ask me so many questions about this Jesus that I spoke of. Later, I would lead her to come to know Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior at her apartment. Her boyfriend knew who I was. She was telling him about Jesus and how the Lord had delivered me from alcohol and from the addictive lifestyle I was leading in the nightclubs. Most of the time I saw her, she was working and tweaked out. Excuse me. One day she called me very distraught and asked if I could come over to her apartment. She told me where she lived, and I knew of the area and how it was noted for heavy drug trafficking. I prayed and said, Lord. The Lord said, go over. I arrived and she said she had not been to sleep for a few days. I could tell. She said, I want to be free from my addiction and all these crazy drug relationships. I told her if she would ask Christ into her life, she would be free, and she prayed with me to receive Christ. It was incredible. The living room filled with the heavy, tangible presence of God, and I looked over at her on the couch, and her face just seemed to glow. She laid her head down for the first time in many days and went straight to sleep. Wow. I got up to leave, and just then the door burst open, and her boyfriend and another guy rushed into the living room. Her boyfriend's friend was holding a .357 Magnum in his hand. The boyfriend was in panic and said, I don't think the police saw us coming into the apartment. As they were peeking through the curtains, his friend said, do you want me to kill this guy? The boyfriend looked over at me and said, don't even try. This is the God man I told you about. With that, the man lowered the gun that was pointing directly at me. The boyfriend said, you need to go now. I got up and left and passed a few police cars that were now in the parking lot. I saw the waitress a week later at work. She was clean and set free from the drugs. She told me she had broken up with her boyfriend and who was now in jail. Over the next few months, she grew fast in her relationship with the Lord. Her past was still trying to drag her back, but the Lord was doing such a powerful work in her life. It occurred to me maybe this was the type of woman God would bring into my life to be my wife, someone who come from such a radical deliverance like me. It was at the same time the beautiful blonde and her daughter came into my life. It had been a few months after recording the beautiful blonde's daughter on the radio show. I was visiting them a little bit more on a regular basis. The beautiful blonde knew of this radical girl that I led to the Lord. I must have let her know the possibilities of something happening that would lead to a relationship with this waitress. My family liked the fact that beautiful blonde and her daughter had been part of my life for the past few months. It was crazy. It was a crazy time in the Lord. The radio show, the prayer meetings, crazy youth events, and more. Then one day the beautiful blonde called me and said, come outside towards your patio. I hung up the phone and went outside to find her and her daughter standing in the grass below my second floor apartment building. She looked at me and said, well, if you can't see who I am for you, then you better find out if that girl's supposed to be your wife. I looked down at her and she was really mad. She took the CDs that were in her hands, the ones I gave her, and threw them at me from down below. They came crashing into the railing of the apartment on my patio. She turned around, grabbed her daughter, and she took off. And when she drove out of the parking lot, she squealed the tires on her car. Wow, I thought. Why is she mad at me? Guys, I didn't even have a clue. It was probably a few weeks later that I stopped by her work to tell her I was sorry. I told her that I was on my way to Colorado on a mission from God. She was very indifferent to me. I could tell she was not impressed with my ability to see who she was in my life. I said goodbye and that I'd see her when I got back. She still was not impressed and just looked away. I left that day still confused about what was going on between me and the beautiful blonde. I was traveling through New Mexico on my way to Colorado, and something happened to me that even to this day, is more real than anything I had ever happened before with the Lord. I had just left Albuquerque, New Mexico, and was out in the middle of nowhere when I experienced one of the most powerful manifestations of God in my life. It was funny, powerful, emotional, and frightening all at the same time. I was driving and listening to music when I heard what I thought was a loud spring. And I put the word here like boing. This would go back to old people like myself when cartoons used to have a word, they'd have a sound effect and a word that went with it. And it was boing. Like those old cartoons that would have the audible sound of a spring being released with giant words that went with the sound that said boing. I used to watch cartoon shows as a kid, and this crazy thing was I saw this on a huge screen while I was trying to drive my truck. So here's how that played out. I heard this loud sound of a spring. I have a picture in my head of this huge cartoon word that says boing. There was a powerful thumping in my chest. It felt like my heart was going to explode, and I'm driving. Get the picture? And my ears are ringing because the noise was so loud. I was having a hard time catching my breath, and I was trying to pull my truck off to the side of the road to gather myself. I asked the Lord, what was that? He told me that was the love of God He put in my heart for my wife, Cheryl. He told me my wife was the beautiful blonde and that I was to marry her and her beautiful daughter. I just sat in my truck and cried for what seemed like forever. I'm not sure how long I was on the side of the road, but I called the beautiful blonde later and told her what had happened. Well, come join me on the next chapter as I continue on with this story of the beautiful blonde, her daughter, in chapter 3. It's called Onion Rings, Cheeseburgers, and the Ring. And I realized when I had written this a few years ago, I just realized today, I thought in my head, I had written that story. Then I realized, wait a minute, as I'm looking through here, I didn't finish that story. So I'll have to finish that story. There are some other stories in here concerning Cheryl and concerning what happened concerning the cheeseburger, the onion rings, and the ring, which I would give her, and again, for the second time, ask her to marry me. Yeah, I wish I could tell you from that time 31 years ago that everything was happy, happy, joy, joy, and everything was incredible, but it was not. I'd like to share with you stories of when God put me and Cheryl together, our journey and our mission and our call to reach this generation. She knew my past. She knew the nightclub. She knew in many of this book, I'm telling you the art world stories and whatever. This pretty blonde had to live that frustration with me. And there's a lot of amazing stories in here, and God gets the glory. So here we are 34 years later, and I'm blessed to be a part of their lives, part of Cheryl's life, Cassidy, Keeley, and Kristen, and that had not always been the case, especially the past 17 years. So I'll be telling you some of those stories and what led to God and my wife at the time, Cheryl, telling me you need to leave. Whoa. And that story is still going on today. I'm a part of their lives to a certain degree, but man, when you hear these other stories Does it? Well, yeah. So I'm going to tell you more stories out of here. There's stories. A few of these stories, again, the producers have said these are make feature films. Good. That's what God wants, because there's more details that goes with all this stuff. So thank you so much for your prayers. Thank you for your support. Trying to get music to you all. I have a truck that's down right now. We're going to need some serious miracles, some serious money to come my way. Get me back on the road. So this is with Cheryl's help and Greg Miller and others. The platform, all this is so, it's amazing to be able to reach you. And it's amazing, again, to the response that I've given, and all glory goes to God. So these are real stories, real life, still living it. Going to need a new vehicle, a new used vehicle, whatever, to get back on the road. Lots of stories, lots of stories. You know, again, I want to tell you, it's like without prayer and support, can't do it. Everybody needs a wheelbarrow full of cash. And I do. And I do. But I need your prayers. And I'm so grateful. Some of you don't have a wheelbarrow full of cash. I'm not even close. But I'm so grateful to your prayers. So grateful for whatever you can do to help me to get music and stories out to others. And I love these platforms, and I continue to encourage others. Don't give up. The book, becoming a movie, becoming a documentary, whatever, it's in its process. If it does nothing more than touch the people it's touching right now, wow, it's beyond worth it. It's always about the one. So, thank you. Got more stories. They're bits and pieces of different parts of the art world, the nightclub, all places I've been, and really looking forward to sharing some stories that led me to go to Lake Havasu City in spring break for 13 years, and the stories are amazing. Share some of those stories, and also in 2026, I will be going to South Padre Island for a couple of weeks, and I'll be amongst over 100,000 college students from around Texas and all over the country. That will be crazy. So, again, thank you so much. Never give up. All right, more stories to come. I might do another one tonight. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll just see where all this stuff goes. And again, I hope I encouraged you. And in Jesus' name, I pray. Stay strong. Our country is in a place where we need Jesus more than ever.